Hey everybody, this is Robert from Black Belt Gaming, continuing my Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition series, and we're jumping back into the monster manual. Let's take a look at some creatures. The Gelatinous Cube, if I've pronounced that correctly. Well, in the old monster manual there is no picture for this. Just a description. So what I'm going to do here is actually crack open the monster book for 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and stat-wise they're almost identical. I think they are actually identical. So let's take a look at the picture over there as I tell you a little bit about this monster. This is indeed a strange creature. The Gelatinous Cube is a scavenger. You can find it in dungeons and different places. It's a cleaner. It will kind of, I don't know, inch along through the passageways, and it basically will clean the floor, the walls, and if it's a tall one, even the ceilings. It is looking for things to digest, and adventurers are a wonderful part of its diet. So these things are nearly transparent, and it's very easy for them to surprise a group of adventurers. They're not completely invisible, but if you're not, if the lighting is poor, or if you're rushing through the hallways, you can run right into this thing. So it does have an advantage on getting the drop or the surprise on characters, and there's a way to mechanically handle that in 1st edition. It says basically it surprises on a 1 through 3. So I believe, if memory serves me right, you roll your d6, and so it's got a good chance of about, I think, maybe 50% of the time catching you by surprise. It's not so unusual for this monster to have treasure inside of it, as you can see from the artwork here. So how dangerous is this thing? Well, it's pretty easy to hit. It has an armor class of 8. So if you turn that over, in modern terms, we're basically looking at needing to roll a 12 to hit this thing. It's got 4 hit dice, and if it hits you, it's got 1 attack. If it hits you, it's going to do 2 to 8 points of damage. So basically you're rolling a d4 twice. But the big thing is it can cause paralyzation. You're going to need to make a save versus paralysis, and if you fail that saving throw, then you're going to be paralyzed for anywhere from 5 to 20 melee rounds. That's a good stretch. So as you're paralyzed, this thing is going to slowly surround you, secrete its digestive fluids, and make a meal out of you. The Gelatinous Cube. Well, I remember my first encounter with one of these. Mechanically here, there's nothing really outstanding or surprising to me as I am sort of revisiting Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. What happened was I was actually over at a friend's house in the afternoon. This was after school. And it was just the two of us. He was the dungeon master. I was a character in his adventure there. And he said that as I rounded the corner, I saw these 2 swords in the hallway, basically floating, almost like dancing swords or some sort of magical swords. There were 2 of them. Upright, as if they were drawn and being held by some invisible creature. And they were sort of swaying back and forth just a little bit in the hallway. And man, I had no idea what this was. And so I was very cautious. I didn't rush in and start swinging. What did I do? I think I remember, for some reason, I think I may have been playing my cleric, because I think I had a hammer. And it was a big, I think it was a big wooden hammer. Because I remember swinging. I said I was going to try to strike at the swords and knock it out of the air with my hammer, because the swords weren't attacking me. But I thought if I didn't sort of take the offensive action, I thought if I try to walk through these things, they're going to cut me apart. So I was going to try to knock it out of the air. So I did an attack roll. He says that I sort of slam my hammer into some sort of invisible force that slows it down, and I kind of hit the sword and it knocks it over a bit at an angle, but it doesn't fall down, and it didn't make any sort of metallic clang or anything. It just sort of pushed it over. So the lighting was very poor where I was, and he said I pull my hammer back, sort of follow through with the swing. And in his description at the time, I think he said my hammer was kind of covered in a goo and kind of sizzling a little bit, almost as if there was some sort of acid on it. And you can imagine how confused I was, because I still couldn't properly see this thing in the dim lighting. And so I remember just spending a lot of time trying to figure out what in the world this thing was. Was I fighting some sort of magically animated set of swords, or what? But in the end, I don't remember exactly what happened. I know I didn't get devoured by the thing, but it was played by that dungeon master as just a real mystery. It was very interesting the way he used that creature and kind of kept it out of sight. But like you can see the items floating there in the picture, he really played that part up. And I don't think second edition was even out at that time. So the idea of having things floating around in there like that came from his imagination. So it's interesting to see how in the second edition artwork that you end up with a picture like this. But there you go, the Gelatinous Cube, one of the stranger creatures that you can encounter in first edition AD&D. Okay, the next monster we'll talk about here is the Sprite. The sort of random number that you can come across is anywhere between 10 and 100. They have an armor class of 6, so basically a 14 in modern terms. They can fly. You can see the wings there in the drawing. Only a hit dice of 1. And 20% of the time you'll find them in their lair. They only have 1 attack, and the damage is done by the weapon type. But these little guys are interesting. This is not the pixie. It's called a sprite. And these little guys dwell in meadows and wooded glens. They're very shy and reclusive, but they hate evil and ugliness of all sorts. And they're armed with little slim swords that are about the same damage dealing as daggers, and small bows, but with half the range of a normal short bow. Their arrows, however, are covered with a special poison that causes sleep for 1 to 6 hours. It's almost like a comatose state. The sprites will slay evil creatures or remove good ones from the place where they may have wandered into their area, and try to remove them and take them some other place. So you might wake up and wake up in a different place than when you attempted to fight these things. and they're quite hard to notice. So sprites are 75% likely to be unnoticed by any creature. And they will attack only evil creatures unless molested first. They have the ability to become invisible at will. They can detect good and evil. And when invisible, they cause opponents to strike at them with a -4 to their attack rolls. They speak their own language, but they also speak common. I don't think I ever encountered sprites in my adventures. However, there was a time, and this was back before we really had any rules for this, there was a time where we, as players, kind of were experimenting with playing monsters as characters. And I played a sprite one time. And the image I had was very much based on this little bit of artwork here, the pointy-toed shoes and everything. And I thought I need to come up with a good name for this little guy. And what's a good name for a sprite? And so I named him Sprint. So he was Sprint the Sprite. And I think I only played him in one little one-shot adventure sometime. But I played him because another one of my friends had played a pixie, and I didn't want to just directly copy his character, so I decided, well, what's kind of like that? That was kind of neat. And I thought, well, nobody's played a sprite. Let me try that one. So that was kind of cute and fun, and I really thought the poison-tipped arrows were pretty neat. So had some fun with Sprint the Sprite. But there you go, another creature there from the old monster manual. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care, and I'll catch you later for some more advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition.